Minister of Provincial Parliament representing the St. Jamestown and Regent Park riding of Toronto Centre from 1999 to 2009. First openly gay MPP elected in Ontario and first openly gay cabinet minister. Minister of Health and Long-Term Care from 2003 to 2007. Minister of Energy and Infrastructure from 2008 to 2009. And Deputy Premier of Ontario from 2006 to 2009. George resigned as an MPP in 2010 to contest the mayoralty of Toronto, narrowly losing to Doug Ford.
The level of deaths that we had in long-term care during COVID, this was significantly preventable by this government. Because Doug Ford separated the Ministry of Long-Term Care from Health. They had two planning tables, and in my strong opinion, Health did not, properly, there was not proper coordination there. And the understanding of vulnerability, who's the most vulnerable to COVID? Anybody in healthcare would know it's long-term care home residents because their average age is 90. Irrespective of everything else, the average age is 90. Now you ask me, what could I have done differently? Because, even though it was a long time ago now, many people have posed those questions. I believe, firstly, some people have decided that one thing has caused the deaths in long-term care. Somebody told me it's because they're not doing enough on-site inspections. Somebody else told me it's because there's private homes. When I was Minister of Health, the City of Toronto home in Scarborough that lost like 44 people. So the deaths can occur in various places. But you know what I personally believe will be shown as the single biggest contributor was the old homes that still had 4-bed wards. So you have a situation where you have impossibility for infection control. And the government, healthcare, had filled the long-term care homes. They emptied out the hospitals to make way. They filled the long-term care, and those people that were infected could not be separated from those that were not infected. So I believe a lot of this was the operational decisions of the Ford government, complicated by especially the age of the homes and those where you had the four bedrooms. But in January, I watched television and I saw the health minister of China say asymptomatic passage. And this is really the key point in my opinion. People say, we didn't apply the lessons of SARS. Yes, we did. Some of them were forgotten. I applied them to the tune of huge sums of money and a lot of attention. I bought 20 million masks. They let those masks get old and deteriorate, and they threw them out and they never replaced them. We learned the lessons of SARS. We bought 20 million masks. And later on, somebody decided, oh, no, we don't need those. We developed robust pandemic planning and we updated those pandemic plans. And then in 2016, someone decided, nah, we don't need to update the pandemic plans. So we did learn lessons from SARS and we forgot them. One other problem, SARS taught us that you can see the illness, symptoms. Even now, I came to this building today and they're asking me about symptoms. Well, are you not aware COVID passes asymptomatic passage? So when you look back on SARS, I think actually the Canadian healthcare environment nationally and at the provincial levels was very, very slow to shift off of SARS, which is visible symptoms, to recognize asymptomatic passage. So I actually think, in a way, they over-relied on the lessons of SARS because it was symptomatic, and we kept applying these symptomatic. Don't come in here if you're exhibiting any of these things. Meanwhile, COVID was walking in free. So I also think that's that when we look back on the public health decisions that were made in the earliest days, people did not treat seriously the prospect of asymptomatic passage because it's way more complicated. Where do you put the precautionary? In public health, we have this thing called the precautionary principle. Where you put the precautionary principle dictates what behaviors are allowed and not allowed. And the precautionary principle, if it was reapplied, would have prevented people from entering the country unscreened for lengthy periods of time and such. So anyway, that's a very complicated answer, and I mentioned a bunch of things in there, but I think the key thing that I would say is it was not inevitable that we would have that level of loss in long-term care. Certain amount of death, yes, because the people are very old, but those levels, those were not all inevitable deaths. Operational decisions by this government thoroughly complicated the situation. And one more thing, foreign trained workers, foreign trained healthcare workers. In response to one of the challenges that long-term care has in Quebec and in Ontario, similar, not enough workers. And that got worse after COVID. The personal support workers don't want to go and work. Quebec created thousands of new well-paid positions. They call them orderlies in their healthcare system. They created new positions. They trained new people. They brought them on. Ontario did nothing until a week or two ago. For a year. Meanwhile, back at the beginning of COVID, I remember foreign trained workers saying, we want to volunteer, we want to help, how can we help? Those people are still all over here, underutilized, and we just keep pouring money into PSWs, temporary shifts, this, that, and the other. So I think even in response to the crisis, the government response here in Ontario with respect to the human workers, the people that bring all the labor of love to those 90-year-old people, still inadequate response to that, really. Terrible. So, Mr. Ford bears a significant burden of responsibility, in my opinion. And I hope that, I would like to see the Ministry of Long-Term Care rolled back into the Ministry of Health. And as a starting point, I think that I believe that would have saved lives. The Ministry of Health in Ontario is the biggest government department in Canada. The budget now is like $60 billion a year. These are unfathomable sums of money. These 400,000 people work in that enterprise. You can't imagine how many moving parts it has. But the most important thing is you can't imagine the privilege. Yes, the sense of responsibility and the pressure, but the sense of privilege that comes with, being responsible for healthcare, which touches everybody.
As Minister of Health, Smitherman was criticized for failures related to millions of dollars spent on the implementation of an electronic health record system, which the government failed to deliver.
Going back to that time, 2003 until 2008, was before the app mentality and was mostly about hardware, about laying fiber optic cable and building the government's own secure fiber optic network to carry the data. Then times changed and people said, no, government doesn't need to own their own fiber optics, they can share with others. And this is really what happened in a sense. Significant money, hundreds of millions of dollars were spent laying cable. But the laying cable doesn't help the patients, not for a long time. I was in the phase of building the infrastructure when people were wanting to see the results for the patients. And those results are very slow to come even now. So a lot of criticism from that. I look at it in retrospect though. Over that time, I was responsible for the allocation of something like $200 billion. That expenditure on e-health, around $1 billion, and receiving a significant amount of focus. But on the broad range of things that we did, the accomplishments outweigh those criticisms. And I'm immensely proud of the things that I was able to accomplish during that time, like adding 50 community health centers in Ontario, building 40 new hospitals, bringing 2 million people new models of primary care, family health teams, and all of that. So people in politics will only focus on the things that they don't like. That was crappy, or what have you. But for me, I have no problem looking back on those times, knowing that I did my utmost, worked the hardest that I could, and made the best decisions that I could. Not all of them are perfect, of course, but we did Dalton McGuinty, my premier at the time, made a lot of improvement to public health and public education services in that time, so really proud of it. People will focus on what they think went wrong, and no one wants to give the politician any credit. So that's okay. You have to accept that. If you don't like rejection, don't go into politics. You know, you're trying to stand on the corner and introduce yourself. Most people don't want to talk and all of this.
What do you think about the situation here, and how your thoughts and your program helped or could help also in downtown St. James?
You know, I personally, I love St. Jamestown. I'm, maybe some people won't like this, but I'm going to live in Via Bloor in those condominiums being built in St. Jamestown on the north side there, because I love that area and I'm looking forward to it. I think that from a health standpoint, St. Jamestown is one of the areas still most in need of more support. And I think that, you know, whereas Regent Park has a community health center, I really feel, and St. Jamestown, we have Sherburne Health Center and others, and St. Mike's Family Practice doing supports in there. But personally, I think that over time, St. Jamestown needs more coordinating health supports. I know there's been studies done and people know more about it than me by now, but looking back over time, I really think that that's something that we need more and more and more of in St. Jamestown. We have a lot of social needs there, not just seniors, that are not met. And we have many people aging in place over a long period of time. It's surprising till you go and knock on doors, you find the people that have lived in those buildings since they were built in the 1960s. Well, those people need supports, but that neighborhood is not, you know, it's not over supported, that's for sure. So when I look at St. Jamestown, I say that's unfinished business, and there's still a lot of urgent healthcare need that we need to be focusing on to make it an even healthier community, and many other things in that community which are going to need attention also, especially related to the old age of the buildings, and also some of the terrible relationship at the street level has been badly knit together. If I had been elected as the city councillor in 2018, I would have made a priority of renewing St. Jamestown in the same way that Pam McConnell and I made a priority of the renewal of Regent Park. Not the same thing, because so many private landlords in St. Jamestown is much more complicated and different. But some things in St. Jamestown, like when you walk up towards the school, you're still crossing streets that have not properly had the curbs cut. People with walkers and seniors and parents pushing strollers, still in St. Jamestown, after 30 or 40 years, navigating roadways and disconnected sidewalks to me it's a bit embarrassing. So I love St. Jamestown, and I'm strongly in favor of it getting more support and more resources. Social resources to support the people, but also more work on the construction of the buildings and also the streetscape there. I think St. Jamestown deserves better and deserves more.
In 2008, George became the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure. The Green Energy Act has resulted in a series of record-breaking corporate investments in wind and solar energy worth billions of dollars. In 2009, the World Wind Energy Association chose Smitherman as the recipient of their annual World Wind Energy Award for his outstanding achievements in making Ontario the leading wind energy jurisdiction in North America.
I had a chance after I was Minister of Health, I became Minister of Energy and Infrastructure. Mr. McGuinty structured the portfolio of energy and infrastructure, bringing two big ministries together in a super ministry, and I was given important responsibilities there to try and drive economic activity after the 2008 financial crisis. There's a lot of criticism of wind turbines and solar panels, and people say it's an expensive form of electricity. So when I was Minister of Energy, I built a lot of those things. I brought a lot of those, and I personally think that Ontario's future needs to have more emphasis on those things, not less. But you know, Ontario has a long history with nuclear power. And I believe that clouds Ontario's thinking quite a bit. And nuclear power is never fully costed. And today there was a story I read in the newspaper about the $23 billion expenditure to bury the nuclear waste. Where are we going to put the nuclear waste that's going to live on and on and on and on is a $23 billion question. So here again, in politics they criticize you for things they don't like. What I know is that Ontario's air is much cleaner than it was when I became part of a government. We had coal-fired generation in Ontario and now we don't. But I think if we look to Ontario's future, we need to reduce our reliance on nuclear energy and be more innovative about electricity solutions. So I look back on it and I'm really, really proud that Ontario is a global leader in green energy. Yeah. And but conservative people especially, old white men especially, they love nuclear power. And they've been convinced that it's cheap and easy. And it's not cheap and it's not easy. So I think if we look to the future in Ontario, we're going to have some really hard debates about the proportion of our electricity that comes from nuclear power. And also, if we could have a few more Niagara Falls, it would be amazing, because Niagara Falls is producing every day like 20 or 25% of all the electricity that we use, but not quite enough. But that's the best one, Niagara Falls.
If you would use today's technology, you know, like it's been 10 years, right? More around a decade, and many things, especially with technology, have changed. And now, like this is, I see everything you're talking about, and everything, all of this experience. That's what we are trying to develop with the applications and, you know, like the new technology. What would have you done to, you know, like of today, or used of today's technology that would have?
I think, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, electric energy storage is the big thing. Like if you're going to have renewable energy, you have to store, you have to get it when you can. Not always sunny, not always windy. The water can not, and not always possible to keep the water behind the waterfall. Yeah. So energy, so I would say there's two answers. One is energy storage. If you're going to have an electricity system with a lot of renewable energy into it, you need to have some big batteries. Now you can actually have like big piles of batteries, or you can create a huge water reservoirs, storing water and using that reservoir to generate electricity when you don't have the renewable sources going. So there are proposals that's called energy storage. And this is something Ontario needs to look at more carefully. The second thing I would say is that we need to develop more of the electricity where we use it. Less wires running here and there. We could call this district energy or what have you, but I think that more integrated energy, as we're building new homes, we really should be, those homes should be contributing to their own electricity use. We're not maximizing the potential for that, but personally I think that, that's the technology that's very available, is to create more localized electricity district solutions, and I think that over time we'll rely on those things more because it's very expensive to run wires everywhere. Yeah. It's very expensive, especially with climate change and more risk coming for ice storms. All of those wires and lines create a lot of vulnerabilities. And if we're going to make our communities more resilient to climate change, Toronto is the most vulnerable place going. There's one big cable supplies all the electricity for Toronto. Not 2 routes, not 3 routes, pretty much one. Toronto's vulnerability to a major power disruption is quite frightening, really. And I was there in St. Jamestown on the day of the blackout in 2003. And we had only the TCHC buildings had elevators, had backup generators, so a little bit of elevator action. The other buildings, we were there looking up at these massive buildings. We got donations of water, but we didn't know where the vulnerable people were. And, of course, this is the kind of vulnerability that I worry about for a place like St. Jamestown is with respect to electricity. If we're generating more electricity in local areas, we're much less vulnerable.
In 2010, George Smitherman resigned as a member of parliament to run for mayor of Toronto, and with 35.6% of the vote, is narrowly defeated by Rob Ford, who got 41% of the vote.
It's not easy to live down losing an election to Rob Ford, and especially as he became so notorious. It was a victim of the times in a certain way, is that that election was, in the United States, the Tea Party was fully alive, so there was a real kind of anti-government response in that time, and I'm the government guy, so he was perfectly suited and he really did a great job. He made the very most of all of the things that he had stood for, and my situation was a lot more complicated, a little bit more like when Hillary Clinton runs and she's done all of these things. Not everybody remembers everything beautifully, so it was a very, in one hand I'm so fortunate as I had my shot, but on the other hand, of course, didn't come out the way I would have preferred. But if I was a person that got hung up on regret, then man, oh man, I'd be back where I don't know, because there's lots of things that I've done that I might have done differently, but I really don't get hung up on regret. Thank you for the privilege of being in public life, because it's just given me a chance to experience so many things and meet so many people. So I'm happy to have a chance to talk about it, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, George Smitherman. That's amazing. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's very open, very friendly, informative. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Me too. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Please do not forget to like, comment, and share to our channel. Follow us on all our social media platforms. And for more information, please check out our website.